Oh, oh. How are you? And greetings from Niagara Falls. If you reflect on what helped you the most today or harmed you the most today, it is probably a relationship. It has impacted you the most. It has affected you the most. Do you all agree? If someone complimented you today that is close to you, you feel great. If someone criticized you who's close to you, you feel not so great. Looking into this more, when we are in a relationship, and I'm not just specifying a romantic relationship, I mean a friend, I mean a sibling, I mean a coworker, when they are engaged in self-development, it is almost like it's a blessing. And when they're not engaged in self-development, it's almost like it's a curse. Do you all resonate with that? I interact with so many seekers whose, let's say, their significant other is not engaged in self-development, and it's very hard for them because they're engaged in self-development. And I bring this up because all of you are engaged in self-development. You're trying to be the best version of yourself and to be paired up with someone else who's also trying to do the same. That is a blessing, that is a privilege. And what's very lovely about our mentorship sangha, earlier this morning I'd used the term suhrid, someone who's large-hearted, someone who lives for bigness. That means they live for another even if they don't know the other person, even if there's no benefit from the other person. Our mentorship sangha gives us the opportunity to practice being large-hearted. If you're a mentee, you don't know your mentor. If you're a mentor, you don't know your mentee. Still, you are trying to help each other. That is the application or internalization of self-development. Our mentorship sangha has been flowing for many years now. I always try to keep track, and I believe we've completed 3.5 years now. This is our half-year workshop on reorienting ourselves towards what it means to be a mentor, a mentee. And how lovely is this that we've been flowing together for 3.5 years. This month specifically, we're going to be reflecting on negativity. When you're in a relationship, I again specify any type of relationship. Whatever your weaknesses are, whatever your strengths are, they're magnified. If you just think about weaknesses, if you're an impatient person in a relationship, that impatience comes out much more. If you're a patient person, that comes out much more. Relationships magnify our weaknesses and our strengths, particularly our weaknesses. When we don't work on these weaknesses, when we don't invest in these weaknesses, it starts to turn into negativity. First towards an article, then a circumstance, then a being. Then we start to feel negative about ourselves. Today, Shakavyasa Sheila and I went to see Inside Out 2. How many of you have seen Inside Out 2? It was really good. I couldn't appreciate it fully because I was trying to explain it to Vyasa while the movie was going on. But how she has that anxious thought of, I'm not good enough. And thankfully, that was replaced with, I'm a good person. So, this whole sentiment of, in a relationship, my weaknesses are magnified. Finally, though, it is in my power to feel I'm not good enough or I'm a good person. And that's why we have to dissect negativity so that we don't feel I'm not good enough, but rather I feel I'm a good person. And one more reflection on this. Today we are celebrating Rishi Vyasa's Purnima, or in our tradition, it is the birthday of our guide. In reference to our trust triangle, a characteristic of a guide is that they are empowering. They make us feel that we have more power than we feel that we have. So, keeping all of these reflections in your head and heart and hands, let us continue to be grateful that we have the privilege to be part of a mentorship sangha and really realize that any negativity in our lives is because we're feeling disempowered, and that the way out of this is to feel empowered. And so I transition to our team.
Hariom Avikji and Hariom everyone. It is so wonderful to have you all join us this evening. We have a packed hour, which will include a recap on our Sangha activities from the months gone by, as well as testimonials from a mentor and mentee, as well as a presentation from a seeker from our community, Abhiram Bhashyam. So I get to start us off this evening by sharing some highlights from the year gone by. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share, as it has allowed me to really reflect on what an awesome year it's been. All right, let's get the presentation going. All right. Is everyone able to see this? Okay, fantastic. So the theme in 2024 really was to focus on Sangha. This is based on so much feedback that we received from each one of you, both verbally and through our survey. And as a result of this, we grew our core team by 4 members and created smaller pod sizes. This helped us increase both the cadence and depth of conversation between pod leads and their pod mentors and mentees. Also, based on your feedback, we introduced a diverse range of relatable and innovative wellness workshop topics, including topics on mental health and physical wellness. Also highlighting our international expert speakers, Milan and Jessica, who joined us from the UK to share about their positive and inspiring experiences around mentorship. I think the one workshop which was really moving for me was the March workshop with Ryan, in which he really shared with a lot of openness and vulnerability. And that really made me appreciate our community so much for being able to really cultivate a space in which openness and vulnerability is really encouraged. We also hosted our very first in-person mentorship Sangha meetup. This was in Chicago. We had approximately 15 seekers join us. It was such a lovely evening, even though I wasn't there. It was a lovely evening filled with so much meaningful conversation, as well as a beautiful art activity. And yes, a lot of hidden talent was definitely discovered. There's a photo in the center here that shows some of the artwork that was done. I know that everyone who joined really had a really wonderful time. And just some things to look forward to in the coming months. So we have some really meaningful wellness workshops to look forward to. So the topic of our August workshop is on anti-bullying and creating a culture of inclusivity. Such an important topic, and this is in collaboration with our Safety of Society initiative. The topic for our September workshop is on the topic of neurodiversity, and this is in collaboration with Parenting Culture. We hope that all of you can join and spread the word. within your circle of family and friends. And also, we have the date firmed up for our next in-person meetup. It's happening in Washington, D.C. on August 24th. So please stay tuned for registration details, but do mark your calendars. The next in-person meetup this year will take place in Boston, and dates as well as additional details will be shared shortly. Also, for those who, like me, are on the other side of the country and are unable to join the in-person retreats, we are going to be recommencing our virtual meetups from September onwards, with signups releasing next month in August. There are really cool topics that will be that are lined up, such as humor in life, building a healthy lifestyle, and so much more. Thank you all so much. Really looking forward to the balance of the year being as exciting as the first half. I would like to hand it over to Lavanya. Hariom.
Hariom, everyone. Thank you, Shito, for that overview of thus far in 2024 and what we have to look forward to. Next in our reorientation, we are going to be hearing from a mentor and a mentee on their experience. So first I have the mentor, Sinjit from DC, and then you'll be hearing from Sharda out of Toronto.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sinju. I live near Washington, D.C., just in Northern Virginia. I've been in this mentorship sangha for about 3 years. I had one mentee, Udit, for about 2 years. Took a little break after that, and then now I've been with Aditya for about a little over 6 months now. And yeah, I've been surprised with how much of a rewarding experience it's been. Honestly, I just kind of signed up because when the mentorship program started, I found out about it during one of the Chick DC annual retreats we had. And I was like, well, like, I'm around. I've been doing stuff. Like, let me just sign up, see what happens. And I end up being paired with Udith, who luckily this is someone I already knew before, but hadn't known super well. But it gave me a chance to get to know him really well. One thing I really appreciate about the program is that there has been a lot of effort, pay attention to the mentors and the mentees and how they're paired up, why they're paired up, matching their personalities, and especially for me, our like life experiences and where we were. And I really like being able to share some of my experience based off of some of the things that I'd been through, and being able to share that and pass on life lessons I learned. And on top of that, honestly, I think the biggest thing that I've enjoyed about this program is being able to spend some time with other people who are seekers, who are engaged in self-development in a sattvic way, but not necessarily a way that's focused on Vedanta. I feel like a lot of my time with Chinmay Mission and with these programs have been focused on directly studying, reading, experiencing Vedanta and discussing that. Whereas this gave me an opportunity to, instead of just learning about it and reading it, putting it into practice a little bit, working with someone else who has a similar mindset, similar outlook, and being able to practice these lessons that we've learned in a practical application. So I've really enjoyed that, and I feel like the more I've been able to put into this, the more I've been able to get out of it. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be part of this program and look forward to continuing to be part of it as long as I can. Thank you.
And hi everyone, my name is Sharda. I live in Mississauga, Ontario, and my mentor is Zuli. My experience with the program has been fantastic. I think Zui is a very thoughtful and introspective person, and a lot of times talking to her gives me a very unique perspective on problems or things that I face in my everyday life. So for example, I think one day I logged onto a call with her, and we were talking about how I feel very unmotivated and uninspired in the mornings. I work from home, so a lot of times I wake up and, kind of like a robot, I make my bed and I brush my teeth and I start work as quickly as possible. So she suggested that just before I get out of bed, I take a second to just be grateful for all the things I have in this life and, just appreciation for everything. And I've started doing it every morning because it's like even taking a second to do something like that reorients me. Yeah, it reorients me so that I can be more positive throughout the day and have a little bit more intention as I move through everything I need to get done through the day. We even tried to start habits together. So both of us, I think, struggle with, being hyper focused on tasks at work and not taking breaks at appropriate times. So both of us together decided we're going to set an alarm so that we can give ourselves a 15-minute break during the day. Just take a second to like take a break, reorient, drink some water, take a walk, something like that. And it kind of sets you up for a more positive mindset and for kind of success for the second half of your day. And talking to Zui every week also, she pushes me to be better and like take the next step in my self-development journey. So she suggested that we should start reading the Bhagavad Gita together. Personally, that kind of thing is it would have been a bit too intimidating for me to start on my own. So I'm grateful that she kind of pushes me step by step and we can, do these things together. And even when I think life gets a little bit overwhelming, she helps me take small steps towards bettering myself. So I'm grateful that this program introduced us, and I'm grateful to have her in my life.
Hariom, everyone. Thank you, Sanju and Sharda, for sharing your reflections with us this evening. This evening, I'm going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Unfortunately, Abhiram is not with us live due to some travel delays, but he has shared a recording that we will be sharing this evening. And just to give a little bit of a background about Abhiram, he grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he was strongly influenced by his Bal Vihar teacher. He is currently a hand and upper extremity surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston and an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School. He feels blessed to have an incredibly supportive family and friends, and he is excited to share a little bit of his journey with us tonight. And with that, I will start the recording.
Hariom, everybody. Sorry in advance for not being able to join it in person. I had to travel to Atlanta this weekend and I picked an early flight. But unfortunately, with all the things happening with CrowdStrike, my flight got very delayed. And so I ended up being in the air at the time that I was supposed to talk. And since, as you'll see, about a third of my session is devoted to preparation and planning, this recording hopefully serves as at least a stand-in for me. I'll make sure that the team, though, gives my contact information, my cell phone, and I'm always happy to answer any questions. And hopefully maybe by the time I get to the end of this talk, I'll have landed and I'll join anyway. But to kick things off today, we're going to speak a little bit about dissecting negativity. Now, full disclosure, I am a surgeon. Some people think this means that I take a chainsaw to things in a quite brutal fashion. Others think I'm so precise that it's the same as doing something on Photoshop and making it look perfect. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. And if you think about what I do day to day, some people ask me, you're a hand surgeon. Do you mostly fix problems associated with typing and keyboarding use like carpal tunnel? And yes, I do that, but my real specialty is something called traumatic and post-traumatic hand surgery. So for example, this pictograph is Ekalavya, who lost his thumb. And one of the things that I do is actually I put amputated parts back on. So if I was there back in the day, I would have tried to put it back on. So this is actually one of my own patients who had a thumb amputation while at Costco accidentally, and I helped put her thumb back on. So knowing a little bit about me and knowing that some of this talk is going to be based around my experiences and currently as a surgeon and how I deal with things, we're going to talk a bit about negativity and we're going to dissect negativity. And we're going to talk about why that even matters. Why is negativity even something important to focus on or try to avoid? It seems obvious, but we'll drill a little bit deeper into it. And then I'll talk about, three frameworks that I have found helpful from Vedanta that I have learned from teachers, including Vivekji, that have helped me deal with negativity and help embrace a more positive attitude. The first is the contrast between expectation versus acceptance. The second is a tri-pronged concept of being grateful, faithful, and peaceful. And the third is really the importance of preparation and planning. And so I highlighted a little bit that a third of today is on preparation and planning. And so this is my effort to prepare and plan for unexpected delays or departures. So jumping back in, why dissect negativity? Why does this session even matter? Well, I think at its root, we can first look at dissect. And what dissect means, it comes from two separate Latin words, dis, which means apart, and secare, which means to cut. So it means to cut apart, but its more defined meaning is to methodically cut up in order to study its internal parts or to analyze in minute detail. So what we're going to do is we're going to dissect negativity and understand what are the aspects that make us negative or have negative emotions sometimes or make us feel this concept of negativity. And then knowing what makes it up, we can help try to counteract it. We make a diagnosis to try to treat. So negativity, we need to know what negativity is and why it's important and why we need to try to combat it. So negativity means to deny, or it's rather a rote form or expression of criticism or pessimism about something. And having negativity or a negative outlook or mindset has some real health effects on our body. It has some real health effects on our mind, and it has some real effects on how we behave and how we live life. It can cause sleeping problems. It can cause fatigue. It can give you a sense of lack of motivation or focus. It can create memory problems, overwhelming sense of anxiety or feeling overwhelmed. And the worst part is a negative mindset or negativity in general can cause us to avoid the very things that may help, like our friends or our family members or exercise or constraint. So knowing that negativity is bad or is not an area that we wish to dwell in all the time, and having some sense of how to break it down at an overarching framework, this is a very nice article that came out that talked about 4 ways in which people could approach negativity and actually counteract it with something called healthy positivity. So what are those 4 things? The first is spirituality, and I think that's one of the main purposes of why we're all here. The second, and all of these things I think fit into Chinmaya mission and the things we learn together here. So spirituality, purpose, meaning, and connection. These are the 4 key antidotes to combating negativity. Now, when I just say it so simply, it seems like, duh, of course, these are the 4 things. But like most things, trying to actualize them is much harder. I'm going to use an example of a wrist fracture today, mostly because this is also something that I like to fix, but because I think it provides a nice example of how we can approach a problem, dissect it, break it down, and build it back up. So at first glance, saying that I want you to be spiritual, have purpose, meaning, and have connection, this sounds really easy. It's as easy as saying that, well, this person had a very bad wrist fracture. The bone is in lots of pieces. Actually, this piece of bone is sticking out of the skin. All I want you to do is put it back together. And I'm going to have you put it back together with some plates and screws. And then you're going to get a great result. Someone's going to get back all their motion. They're going to be happy. They're going to be able to do everything. But that's a little bit hard if you don't know all of the steps on the way to get there. And you don't know how to actually start from point A and make your way to point B and then C and then all the way to Z. And it's a little bit hard if the only thing that you can see is from point A to point Z. And I think that's where negativity sometimes affects us. It inhibits our pathway on the journey, and it stops us from embracing all of the little bumps and hiccups on the road. And sometimes you may have been going towards Z, but maybe Y was just where you wanted to end up. So negativity also stops us from seeing and embracing the joys of the present. So knowing all this, I'm going to talk a little bit now about three frameworks that have helped me kind of dissect and avoid negativity and combat it with healthy positivity or just happiness in the moments of living. The first framework is this balance, or actually I'd say contrast between expectation and acceptance. Why am I bringing up expectation? Well, I think the perils of expectation are that it breeds negativity, and it's a false sense of negativity, because what generally ends up happening is we all set an expectation, but reality is what reality is, and it will happen. And when our expectations are unmet, meaning what we expect is greater than what the reality of the situation is, we have an overwhelming sense, or we have a sense of sadness and unhappiness. Granted, that's not true unhappiness, or in the contrast, when we exceed our expectations, we have this sense of happiness. But again, that's not true happiness like we talk about at Chinmaya Mission or in Vedanta. But the very fact of having expectation and its contrast with reality can enforce and perpetuate a cycle of negativity, because what we expect to happen doesn't necessarily happen, and that's what we want it to happen. And so having these wants and expectations can breed a cycle of negativity. Why is that not reasonable? Well, I showed you an example of a wrist fracture that was fixed perfectly. And in this example, this is not my patient, but another patient, and I happen to know the surgeon, and they did a perfect job. They lined everything up just like the previous case. They put the right plates and screws in place. Everything went together without a hitch in surgery. But the patient's final result wasn't a great one. And if you can see here, all of these screws broke. This wasn't anything to do with the surgeon or what happened, but it just had to do with a really bad tray. So the implant manufacturer for these 4 screws, unfortunately, there was some type of manufacturing defect in that batch. They all broke. Had nothing to do with performing perfectly on that day, had nothing to do with the expectations. Although in this case, most surgeons would feel very sad and bad because complications stink when things don't go right. But if we go back to the previous slide, what really happened here is reality was going to happen no matter what. But the feeling of sadness that comes from an expectation is because reality didn't match up to what was expected. But at the end of the day, none of us, even as surgeons, had a control over the fact that a set of screws weren't going to work. So my first thing that I come back to all the time, and which also helps me, is an acceptance that reality is what it is. We have a right to perform what our duty is, and we do our best, and we do it to our utmost. But we are not entitled, and nor do we have any right to claim the fruits of that action. That's an exhortation to me, really, to live in the moment and to do your duty, not because you're expecting a result, but because it is the thing to do in that moment. It is the thing that we are trained to do. The second way that I kind of apply this concept of acceptance is something I learned from Vivekji last year, actually, when I was taking the Thursday night course. And basically, it comes from this verse. And what it says is, one should smile for what they receive from the divine. It's another very nice and simple explanation of being joyous for the things that are given to us. At a functional level, if you think about it, it's very simple to when people say, do your best, forget the rest. You cannot always control the final result, as we've gone over. Secondly, mistakes can happen, but we can learn from them. And in fact, that learning is lifelong and endless. And the process of self-improvement is what can allow us to keep going, allow us to accept when our expectations don't match reality, and allow us to understand that perhaps we should never have had those expectations to begin with. So now that we've covered expectation and its perils, along with the counterpoint of acceptance, I think another concept that's really helpful is the thought of gratefulness, faithfulness, and peacefulness. And I'm going to pause here for a second and put up this picture. And I'm going to ask people in the chat to say, what do you think this is? Where do you think this photo comes from? And why do you think I might be putting it up right now? It's hard to time yourself when you're being recorded, but I guess it's also easy because I can just look at my clock. So I'm going to wait truly for 30 seconds to give people a chance to respond. And hopefully our course moderators can also chime in, although they don't know what this is necessarily because I didn't tell anyone. All right. So these are actually the deck chairs on the ship, the Titanic. And this is actually a picture taken the day before the Titanic sunk. Actually, it could have been taken on any day because the deck chairs were arranged very systematically and in a very organized fashion by the workers on the ship, who came into work every day trying to do their best job to line everything up and to have things be where they were. We all know what happened to the Titanic. It unfortunately hit an iceberg. And all of this rearrangement of the deck chairs on the Titanic, just like the saying says, was for naught. Because at the end of the day, the bigger context of what was happening with the ship overrode the small things. But did that take away the joy of the day-to-day living of those people who rearranged it, or the satisfaction, or just the happiness of doing your job and of doing it? Probably not, because we don't know what's happening around in the world, but we can live in the moment and do the best that we can in the moment and understand that what's given to us is what is given. Going back to the example of that wrist fracture, we have an idea of how to go from point A to point B in terms of what we want to get to. But we also have to realize that along that way, there are multiple small micro challenges, and we have to expect the difficulty that comes with them. It's not so simple to just go from the skin down to a broken bone and do it carefully. Why? Well, there's the skin that's over here, but underneath it, we have to be careful. We have to move the arteries out of the way. We have to move the nerve out of the way. We have to find the muscles and tendons. The eyes must see these things and must find them and move them out of the way carefully. Surgery is not color-coded, so it's a little bit more challenging than you might think. And then even when you get to the bone, all of the pieces of the bone may not be in a particular way that you anticipated. And so you have to be flexible, understand in what patterns they can come, and build it back up and fix it in an appropriate manner. I think this comes back to this concept of sthane, which is that all that comes in and out of our lives is proper. And so the second thing that I remind myself when I encounter myself feeling negative, or I end up in a pattern where I'm feeling a little bit gloomy or have a forecast is down, is I remember these three concepts. Number one, if we work hard for what we want and we get it now, we are to be grateful. If we work hard and we get it later, we are to be faithful. And third, if we work hard and we don't get it, rather than being angry or negative, we are to be peaceful. This is also from that course that Vivekji taught. And so this is something that I try to live day in and day out. And I think this also helps me both dissect and counteract negativity in my life. So lastly, we've talked about expectation versus acceptance. We've talked about how being grateful, faithful, and peaceful can be an antidote to negativity. What is the last thing that we can do? I think the last thing we can do is sometimes it is easy to take these first 2 points and say, well, reality is what reality is. So why should I try hard, or why should I do anything to counteract it? And I think what that means is that you're not living in the present and you're not enjoying the journey. So what are some ways to actually enjoy the journey, enjoy the pathway from point A to Z? This reminds me of sometimes when people ask me, wow, your training must have been a long time. It's true. My training lasted from when I was 18 years old, starting college, until I was 31. So I guess it was like 13 or 14 years. It can seem like a long time, but the way it feels is much shorter because the journey itself was very fun. It had its ups and its downs, but I learned a lot and I embraced things as I went along. And was I happy every day? Probably not. Would I do it again? Probably, because it feels like I have purpose and meaning in my life. Does preparation and planning is it even important? Well, if you were to follow Allen Iverson and his famous meme as he exhorted about how practice isn't a game, you'd say no. But I actually think that practice is everything. I think that practice and practicing daily and practicing every minute is how we build the good habits that when the moments come, we're ready for them and that we're prepared. In fact, in surgery, practice and preparation is everything. Anyone can operate. It's the preparation and planning that goes into the surgery, not the actual technical execution that matters. And there's this very famous saying that can apply, I think, to surgery, but also life, that it's better to throw your disasters into a waste paper basket rather than consign your patients or others to the scrap heap. So be thoughtful, be prepared, and plan. Now, is it just that practice makes perfect? I think more and more we know that that's just not true. What we really mean is that perfect practice makes perfect. And what we really mean more than that isn't that it's perfect practice, it's that it's deliberative practice. It's practice with intentionality. It's practice with a goal or an endpoint in mind, not in terms of a final outcome, but as a process-based measure of skill development. That is what allows us to modulate what happens when we have expectation that encounters reality. It helps us to continually improve, and it allows us to slowly build expertise. At its core, it's an exercise in building knowledge and building knowledge as a skill, because truly the eye see what the mind knows. And by educating ourselves, by applying jnana and thinking, we slowly begin to change our mindset. We can actually actively counteract negativity, not simply intentionally, but subconsciously. It can become part of who we are to not be negative. So at the end, if we apply the same thing, the same is true for how to fix a wrist fracture. I showed you a picture of the skin. I showed you a picture of all the tendons and arteries. It's easy, again, to say all of these things are there. But what real preparation and practice is to write it down, or is to find a way to annotate or log it and do it daily. I do this for every case that I do. Every resident or trainee or medical student who operates with me knows that I demand and expect this. If you're going to join a surgery, you have to have your own plan, and we'll go over it together. At the end, it's probably my plan. That's the one that's implemented. But I learn stuff from people all the time, and we do it together, and we all go through our plans. Every surgery is done at least 3 times. The first time it's done in our minds. The second time it's done before surgery and discussing it. And the third surgery is the surgery itself. The truth is there's a fourth time. After surgery, we review the surgery and all its steps again to go over what we did right and what we did wrong and how we can be better. That also affects us to detach ourselves, not just from the outcome of the surgery, but embrace actually the process along the way. And so this is one of my preoperative plans for how to fix a fracture like this, from the skin incision all the way to the bone, fixing the bone, and then coming back and closing everything. And at the end, I think with preparation, practice, and intentionality, you can get a pretty good result in terms of realigning the bone and allowing someone to have functional motion again. So at the end of today, basically, I wanted to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of my thoughts about why negativity can be so harmful, why dissecting negativity can give us some approaches to counteracting it, and how 3 big frameworks that are driven from Vedanta have been really helpful to me in my daily life in approaching negativity. Expectation versus acceptance. In a nutshell, today I was expecting to give this talk in person, and I was really looking forward to it. But I accept the reality of the fact that no one could predict a CrowdStrike IT situation, and then I ended up stranded and will eventually wake my way back. But number 2, I'm still grateful for the opportunity to be able to have this talk, to have been prepared ahead of time. I'm still faithful and we'll all be peaceful about the fact that we'll still have opportunities to discuss further and learn together. And lastly, preparation and planning. Be prepared for the unexpected, embrace the journey, embrace the moments. I think these are really the keys for me in dissecting negativity, embracing healthy positivity, and just trying to live a more happy and healthy life. So I wanted to thank everyone again. I am always available. I'll give my email and contact information to the course organizers who probably already have it. And I look forward to chatting with you all soon again. All right. Thank you. Hariom.
Awesome. That was wonderful and so much information in such a short time. But we're really thankful to Abhiram for, being prepared and, like he said on there, and sharing this with us. It was just amazing how he kind of, compared dissecting negativity with its work, and how it kind of just goes hand in hand, really in every situation, probably in all of our own lives and the work that we do also. But at this time, we're gonna go into our breakout rooms, and I'm gonna type in the topic, but the topic that we're gonna discuss is, let's see here. Wherein have you dealt with a negative situation and that you have faced, and how did you handle it? And what would you have done differently if you could, and why or why not? Hariom, everyone. I hope everybody had a great discussion. If there's anybody that would like to share any insights or anything that they spoke about or heard in their breakouts.
Hariom, everyone. What a wonderful topic. I think in our breakout group, the main theme was just how when you're in the thick of it, that negativity can just spiral out of control. And then with some distance, and perhaps more perspective, more life experiences, it seems so temporary, so insignificant, and perhaps something that you shouldn't have wasted so much of your energy on. And so, regardless of sort of like what the situations were, work, personal, regardless of when they were happening, I feel like that was the common thread within our group. Hariom.
Thanks, Neha. That's so true. And, we talked about something similar in ours, and just that if you put in the work, like Abhiram said, like the results do, like they happen just how they're supposed to. And in the end, it all just works out, whether it's immediate results or the results come a little bit later. So.
Hariom, everyone.